Have you ever woken up feeling a sharp ache in your knees and wondered if that pain was here to stay? I know how that feels because I've been there too. Living day after day with a constant reminder that my body wasn't quite what it used to be. It's tough admitting that something as simple as getting out of bed or climbing a few steps could turn into a struggle. For years, I brushed off the pain as just part of getting older, like it was some kind of sentence we all have to accept. But deep down, I wished there was an easier way, something gentle, natural, and doable in the comfort of my own home. What if I told you there is a simple, soothing solution that helped me ease that stubborn knee pain in just a few nights? No expensive treatments, no complicated routines, just a little ritual that fits right into your evenings and brings surprising relief. It's not magic, but it's something I discovered almost by accident, and it gave me back more than just less pain. It gave me hope and freedom. If you've been carrying this kind of pain too, I'd love to hear your story. Because you deserve to live better, to move freely, and to wake up without that heavy ache weighing you down. Let's take this journey together. If you are not subscribed, subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. Now, let's begin. There's a certain moment in life when you realize pain has quietly become your constant companion. It doesn't arrive all at once, but rather slips in quietly, softly, almost politely at first, barely more than a whisper in the background of your day. For me, it began with the smallest twinge in my left knee while climbing the stairs at my daughter's house, the sort of thing you chalk up to having overdone it, or slept funny. I remember pausing halfway up, just for a second, telling myself it was nothing, maybe a sign to slow down. After all, we're told that aches and pains are part of getting older and that it's normal to slow our pace. But what starts as a whisper gradually becomes a persistent murmur. That first twinge, so easy to dismiss, becomes a dull ache every time you stand from your favorite recliner, then a throb when you try to walk out to the mailbox. Suddenly, everyday moments require planning and careful movement. You start to bargain with yourself. If I go for a walk today, maybe I'll skip gardening tomorrow. If I visit my friend across town, I better rest up in advance. Life turns into a series of negotiations, not just with the outside world, but with your own body. I know I'm not alone in this. Maybe you've had a similar moment, a sudden realization, perhaps while reaching for the cereal box on the top shelf when pain shoots through your knee and reminds you of your body's new boundaries. Or maybe, like me, you remember looking in the mirror and feeling a sense of loss, not just for the person you see, but for the things you used to do without thinking. I used to walk everywhere, find joy in being active, kneel in the garden with my grandchildren, and chase after the dog at the park. Now, each of those things came with a silent question. Will my knees hold up today? Will I regret this later? Pain has a way of shrinking your world, sometimes so gradually you hardly notice until you wake up and realize how small your life has become. Once, I was spontaneous, quick to jump in the car for a Sunday drive, happy to join friends for an afternoon stroll, or say yes to last-minute plans. But over time, my willingness to say yes faded, replaced by the growing anxiety of how much pain I might endure for the pleasure of company or a change of scenery. The thing about knee pain, especially as we age, is that it's not just physical. It's emotional, too. It seeps into your confidence, your sense of independence, your hope. I used to pride myself on taking care of my home, tidying up, cooking big family dinners, and making sure the house felt warm and welcoming. But when every step feels uncertain, even the simplest chores become daunting. I started to weigh the risk of pain against the reward of doing something for myself or my family. Was sweeping the porch worth the ache I'd feel that night? Would baking cookies with my granddaughter mean limping through the rest of the week? The calculations became endless. It's a lonely feeling. Even when you have a loving spouse, children, friends, people who care deeply for you, there is a part of the struggle that feels yours alone. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, watching my husband mow the lawn, and wanting nothing more than to join him outside, to feel the grass under my feet, to help with the garden beds we used to plant together each spring. I'd watch him from the window, a bittersweet ache in my chest, and wonder if he noticed my absence and if he missed our shared routines as much as I did. Sometimes, I'd try to put on a brave face, joking about my creaky knees or my built-in weather predictor, but inside, I felt diminished, as if part of me was quietly slipping away. There's something almost universal about this kind of pain. If you've ever attended a senior center activity or joined a church social, you know how quickly talk turns to joints and bones, to hips and knees, to the latest cream or pill someone's doctor recommended. At first, I found comfort in these conversations, reassurance that I wasn't the only one going through it, that my struggles were shared by so many other women. But after a while, even this camaraderie can turn heavy. How many times can we exchange stories about sleepless nights, about waking up with aching knees, about the frustration of feeling your body betray you again and again? The progression of knee pain is rarely dramatic. It's more often slow and steady, a constant drumbeat that underscores the passage of time. For me, the ache began with stairs and long walks. Then came the stiffness in the morning, the feeling that my knees were made of rusty hinges that needed oiling before I could start my day. I'd swing my legs out of bed and pause, bracing myself for the discomfort that would shoot through my joints. Some mornings, I'd sit on the edge of the mattress, just breathing, gathering the will to move. On the worst days, I'd grab hold of the dresser or the bedpost for support, willing myself upright. Simple things, like getting in and out of the car, became complicated. I found myself choosing parking spots closer to store entrances, skipping aisles at the grocery store, and even avoiding trips altogether if I knew there would be too much walking involved. I used to love window shopping with my sister or wandering through the farmer's market, but now the thought of uneven pavement or crowded spaces made me anxious. Would there be a bench nearby? Would anyone notice if I needed to stop and rest? That gnawing uncertainty followed me everywhere. At home, the accommodations grew, almost without me realizing. A pillow placed just so behind my knees, a small step stool in the kitchen so I wouldn't have to crouch down low, a sturdy chair always within reach. My family noticed the changes, even when I tried to hide them. My son offered to help carry laundry, my daughter urged me to take it easy, and my grandchildren tiptoed around me with the gentle care that children show when they sense vulnerability in someone they love. And while I appreciated their kindness, it sometimes stung, a reminder that I was no longer as strong or self-sufficient as I once was. There's a certain indignity in having your world shrink because of pain. I've always believed in being active, in doing for myself, in staying busy and involved. So admitting that my knees were dictating my schedule, my social life, and even my happiness, felt like a defeat. But pain doesn't care about pride. It wears you down, day after day, until you begin to accept a smaller life, a quieter presence. I found myself saying no more often. No, I can't join you for that walk. No, I'll stay home from the trip this year. No, I don't think I can help with the bake sale, the church supper, or the block party. Each no felt like a tiny betrayal of the person I used to be, the woman who organized outings, hosted family dinners, and volunteered for everything. Friends would call and invite me to lunch or an afternoon movie, and I'd hear myself making excuses. Maybe next time, I'm feeling tired today, my knees are acting up. The invitations became less frequent. The phone rang less often. What's worse is the subtle guilt that creeps in. I worried that I was letting people down, that my absence was felt, and that I was becoming a burden. I'd replay conversations in my mind, wondering if my friends were disappointed in me, if my family resented having to pick up the slack. I tried to mask my pain, to keep up appearances, to smile, and to act like nothing had changed. But pain is a stubborn companion. It rarely lets you forget. One night, after a particularly difficult day, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling as if I were sinking into the mattress. I thought about all the things I had stopped doing. Line dancing with my girlfriends, tending to my beloved roses, playing tag with my grandkids in the backyard. The list was longer than I wanted to admit. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized how much of my life I had surrendered, bit by bit, to this relentless pain. In moments like these, it's easy to feel isolated, as if you're the only one whose world has shrunk so dramatically. But when I finally started talking to others and opening up about my struggles, I learned just how common this experience is. At my local community center, I met women whose stories echoed my own. Different faces, different lives, but the same slow encroachment of pain, the same sense of loss. We traded remedies, swapped advice, and laughed ruefully about our shared misadventures. One friend told of getting stuck in a movie theater seat. Another recounted a fall at the grocery store that left her more embarrassed than hurt. Something is comforting in this shared experience, in knowing you're not alone, that your pain is not a personal failing but a challenge faced by so many as we age. Yet, for all the camaraderie, it's hard not to envy those who seem to handle their pain with more grace, or who somehow remain more active and engaged. I'd watch my neighbor, a spry 80-year-old, walking her dog briskly every morning, and wonder what secret she possessed. Was it genetics, willpower, some magic treatment I hadn't discovered? I felt both admiration and longing, a wish to reclaim that freedom, to walk without fear or hesitation. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Of course, pain doesn't just limit our bodies, it alters our choices. My world became smaller as I adjusted my expectations. Instead of long walks, I took short strolls to the mailbox, clutching the railing for support. Instead of ambitious projects, I settled for what I could manage. A few flowers in a window box rather than an entire garden, a quick microwave meal instead of a sprawling Sunday supper. My calendar, once filled with plans, grew emptier as I canceled or postponed, always telling myself that I'd feel better next week, next month, next season. But weeks turned into months, and hope became harder to hold on to. I started to feel invisible, as if my life had been put on pause. Friends moved on, new neighbors arrived, grandchildren grew older, and the world kept spinning while I watched from the sidelines. The hardest part wasn't the pain itself, it was the sense of being left behind. It's easy to start defining yourself by your limitations rather than your possibilities. I noticed how often I prefaced conversations with, "I can't do that anymore," or "I'm not as steady on my feet these days." Pain changes the language you use about yourself. It narrows your sense of identity, turning you from an active participant in your own story into a passive observer. Still, in the quiet moments, early mornings when the house was still, or late at night when sleep wouldn't come, I'd remember who I used to be. I'd close my eyes and see myself dancing in the kitchen, chasing after grandkids in the yard, kneeling among rows of marigolds and tomatoes. Those memories became bittersweet reminders of the life I longed to reclaim. For a long time, I resisted asking for help. I told myself I was fine, that the pain was manageable, and that I didn't want to burden anyone. But pain wears down even the most determined spirit. Eventually, I found myself at the doctor's office, explaining my symptoms, listing all the things I'd tried, over-the-counter pills, creams, ice packs, heat pads. I listened as the doctor explained the reality of aging joints, of cartilage wearing down, of inflammation and wear and tear. She was kind and patient, offering practical advice and options. Physical therapy, gentle exercises, dietary changes, and even the possibility of injections or surgery if things grew worse. I nodded and took notes, grateful for her empathy, but also weighed down by the realization that there was no easy fix. Chronic pain, I learned, is a journey, not a destination. What helped most, in those difficult days, was connecting with others who understood. Support groups, both in person and online, became a lifeline. Sharing our stories, our fears, frustrations, small victories, helped lighten the load. I met women who had suffered far worse, whose resilience inspired me to keep trying. Together, we celebrated each other's progress, no matter how small. A friend's success at walking around the block became a triumph for all of us. The simple act of talking, of being seen and heard, was its kind of medicine. Slowly, I learned to shift my perspective. Instead of mourning all that I had lost, I began to focus on what I could still do. Maybe I couldn't walk as far as I once did, but I could enjoy the sunlight on the porch, the laughter of grandchildren, and the comfort of a good book. I found solace in new routines, a gentle stretch each morning, a phone call with an old friend, a hobby that kept my mind engaged even when my body protested. Most of all, I discovered the power of kindness, to myself and others walking this same path. Pain can make you hard and bitter if you let it, but it can also open your heart and make you more compassionate, more patient, and more understanding of the invisible burdens others carry. I learned to ask for help when I needed it, and to offer help in return. Sometimes a listening ear, sometimes a simple word of encouragement. If you're reading this and seeing yourself in these words, I want you to know you're not alone. Our stories may differ in the details, but the core of the experience is the same. We are women who have lived full lives, who have given and loved and worked and cared, and who now find ourselves facing new challenges as our bodies change. It's not easy, and it's not fair, but it's not the end of the story. Pain may shape our days, but it doesn't have to define our spirit. Every small step forward is a victory, every act of courage, getting out of bed, reaching for a friend, trying something new, is a quiet triumph. Our worlds may be smaller, but they are no less precious, no less worthy of joy and hope. And perhaps, in the sharing of our struggles, in the gentle recognition of each other's pain, we find the strength to keep going, to adapt, to persevere, and to rediscover the beauty and possibility that still exists in every single day. When I finally admitted to myself that the pain wasn't going away, I did what so many of us do. I started searching for answers anywhere I could find them. It began innocently enough, asking my doctor during a routine checkup if there was something else I could try. I'd already been taking an over-the-counter pain reliever now and then, the kind most of us have in our kitchen cabinets. Just in case, I'd tell myself. Sometimes, when the pain spiked, I'd reach for a couple of those small white pills and wait, hoping for a little relief. But the thing about pain, especially the kind that settles into your joints and refuses to leave, is that it never really stays away for long. The pills helped, yes, but only for a short time, and never as much as I'd hoped. Some days, the pain returned before the medicine had even worn off. On other days, I found myself hesitating before taking another dose, worrying about what too much medication might do to my stomach, my kidneys, and my heart. My doctor, with gentle concern, warned me not to rely on them too much. She explained that over time, our bodies build a tolerance, and those little white pills lose their magic. That's when the carousel of treatments began. First came the anti-inflammatory creams. My neighbor, a kind woman in her 70s who'd struggled with arthritis for years, swore by a particular brand she'd found at the pharmacy. I bought a tube, then another, then 3 more, each promising deep relief, fast action, or soothing comfort. Each night, I'd rub a cool dollop into my knee, massaging it in as the commercials said, watching TV and hoping that somehow, by the end of the episode, I'd feel better. Sometimes, the cream would leave a tingle or a faint cooling sensation that tricked my mind into thinking it was working. But an hour later, the pain returned, relentless and unchanged. When creams failed, I tried medicated patches. These were a novelty, and I was hopeful. After all, something is reassuring about the idea that a small, sticky square could deliver healing right where it hurt. I tried patches with menthol, capsaicin, herbal blends, and advanced formulas. Each morning, I'd peel off the old patch and carefully smooth a new one over my knee. For a brief moment, the cold or heat distracted me, but the ache persisted underneath, steady as a drumbeat. The wrappers piled up in my bathroom trash, silent evidence of my determination and my disappointment. Some days I felt like a living experiment, my body a canvas for every remedy marketed to people of a certain age. Friends sent me articles from the internet. The 5 best supplements for joint health, miracle foods to erase knee pain, and this one simple trick doctors don't want you to know. I dutifully bought bottles of glucosamine and chondroitin, omega-3 capsules, turmeric tablets, and even collagen powders I mixed into my morning coffee. I tracked my progress, waiting for the promised transformation, but the changes were always subtle if they came at all. Was my pain a little less today, or was it just wishful thinking? My daughter worried about me and suggested physical therapy. I went, more to reassure her than out of faith that it would work. The therapist was lovely, a cheerful woman who guided me through gentle stretches and strengthening exercises. I wanted to believe that if I just worked harder and followed every instruction, I'd turn back the clock on my knees. But some days, even the mildest movements left me aching for hours, and my hope faltered. It wasn't long before the conversation with my doctor turned to prescription medications. She was careful and thorough, explaining the risks and benefits. I tried a low-dose prescription anti-inflammatory, swallowing the pills with my morning orange juice and a prayer. For a while, it took the edge off, enough that I could manage a grocery run or a visit to my granddaughter's recital. But the side effects crept in, heartburn that made me wince, a jittery feeling in my hands, and a nagging anxiety that lingered for hours. I felt like I was trading one discomfort for another, and it hardly seemed fair. Then came injections, a last resort, my doctor called them, but a glimmer of hope for someone who'd tried everything else. I remember sitting in the sterile room, watching the nurse prepare the syringe. I braced myself, feeling vulnerable and oddly embarrassed, like a child afraid of a shot. The medication burned as it entered my knee, and for a few days afterward, I almost believed it was working. The pain softened, my steps grew lighter, and I dared to dream of a life with less pain. But the relief was fleeting. Before long, the old ache returned, stubborn as ever. I'd read stories about people who'd gone for surgery, replacements, repairs, miraculous recoveries, but the prospect terrified me. I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. All the while, I kept a mental list of what I'd tried and what had failed. Pills, creams, patches, injections, supplements, stretches, heat pads, cold packs. The aisles at the pharmacy became as familiar to me as my kitchen. I tried to keep a sense of humor about it. If I line up all my products, I could open a small shop, I joked to my friends. But beneath the laughter was frustration, and beneath the frustration, a growing sadness. Why, with all the science and modern medicine in the world, couldn't anyone help me feel better? As the months rolled on, I started looking beyond my own experience, reaching out to friends and acquaintances who might know something I didn't. We form informal support groups as we age, a sisterhood of women bound by shared aches and stories. I called my friend Eileen, who I'd known since our children were in kindergarten. She listened patiently as I listed my trials, then offered her own, acupuncture, herbal wraps, and even hypnosis. Nothing sticks, she admitted, her voice tinged with the same weary hope I felt. Some days are better, most are just the same. There was Maggie, who lived 2 streets over and prided herself on her stoicism. She'd tried every supplement on the market, convinced that the next bottle might hold the answer. "At least my hair looks shinier," she quipped one day, holding up a jar of fish oil capsules. We laughed, a sound that felt both familiar and strangely comforting. Laughter has a way of soothing the soul, even when it can't soothe the joints. The church ladies were a font of wisdom and cautionary tales. Every Sunday, between sips of lukewarm coffee, someone had a new product to recommend. Edna swore by a homemade ointment of eucalyptus and beeswax, which her grandmother passed down during the Great Depression. Lois recounted her trials with prescription painkillers, her voice trembling as she warned of their addictive grip. Ruth, ever the skeptic, confessed she'd given up on anything but plain old Tylenol and prayer. Sometimes, our conversations drifted from remedies to reflections. What it means to grow older, to watch your body change in ways you can't control. We consoled each other over lost freedoms. The ability to kneel and weed the garden, to dance at a grandchild's wedding, to walk through the grocery store without scouting out the nearest bench. "It's not just the pain," Edna said one afternoon, squeezing my hand. "It's what the pain keeps you from doing." I found support in more unexpected places, too. One of my granddaughters set me up on an online forum for people living with chronic pain. At first, I was wary. Technology isn't always my friend, but soon I was reading stories from women all over the country, women who could have been my neighbors or friends. Their struggles mirrored my own. Some had found relief in unlikely places. Tai Chi classes at the community center, swimming at the YMCA, and meditation and breathing exercises they'd learned on YouTube. Others simply offered encouragement. "Keep looking," they wrote. "What doesn't work for one might work for another. Don't give up." If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Those words meant more to me than any pill or patch. In the darkness of my worst nights, when sleep eluded me and pain pulsed through my knees, I'd remember those women, scattered across states and time zones, holding each other up in small but significant ways. Yet, for all the shared wisdom and camaraderie, there were nights when loneliness pressed in around me, heavy and unyielding. Pain is a peculiar thing. It can make you feel cut off, even from those you love most. There were evenings when my husband would ask if I wanted to take a walk, and I'd force a smile, shaking my head, not wanting to explain for the 100th time why my knees wouldn't cooperate. I felt guilty for slowing him down, for making our once joyful evening strolls a thing of the past. Sometimes, in the quiet of the house, I'd sit by the window and watch as neighbors passed by. Young couples pushing strollers, teenagers on skateboards, old friends out for their evening walks. I'd think of the person I used to be, the woman who'd dash out the door without a second thought, and feel a pang of loss that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with possibility. Isolation crept in slowly, disguised as practicality. "It's easier to stay home," I'd tell myself. "Better not to push it." Phone calls with friends became less frequent, invitations dwindled, and even my closest family started to ask if I needed anything rather than if I wanted company. It's a subtle difference, but it stings all the same. People mean well, but when pain is a constant, even kindness can remind you of what you're missing. There were days when I felt invisible, a background character in my own life. My world narrowed to the radius of my living room, my garden, and the short drive to the grocery store. The ache in my knees became a silent partner, dictating what I could and could not do, casting a shadow over my plans. Hope felt slippery, sometimes lost entirely in the shuffle of doctor's appointments and half-empty bottles in the medicine cabinet. I wish I could say that I met these feelings with nothing but courage and optimism, but that wouldn't be honest. There were days when despair crept in like a fog, obscuring the light, and making the future seem impossibly far away. There were nights when I cried quietly, careful not to wake my husband, and wondered if this was simply my lot, to live in the waiting room of my own life, hoping for a door to open. But even in the hardest moments, there were small sparks that refused to die out. A smile from a friend, a note from my granddaughter, the memory of a day when I walked a little farther than usual. I clung to those sparks, using them to push through the haze of disappointment and frustration. I told myself that each day was a chance to try again, to seek a new remedy, a new approach, even if hope was battered and bruised. And slowly, as I shared my story with others, at church, in online groups, with friends over coffee, I realized that I was not truly alone. Our stories, woven together, formed a tapestry of perseverance and resilience. For every treatment that failed, every promise left unfulfilled, someone was willing to listen, to encourage, and to remind me that giving up was not an option. Pain has a way of making you believe you're smaller, less than you were. But through these struggles, mine and those shared by so many others, I found a different truth. That our worth is not measured by the ease of our days or the smoothness of our steps, but by the courage with which we keep searching, keep hoping, and keep moving forward, one imperfect day at a time. Sometimes, hope slips into our lives when we least expect it. For me, it arrived on an ordinary afternoon, hidden among dust and old memories in the back of a bedroom closet. I had been tidying up, a task that took longer these days, as my knees insisted on frequent breaks. Sorting through boxes of photographs, holiday decorations, and yellowed recipe cards, my hands fell upon a small, hard-bound notebook that had once belonged to my grandmother. The cover was faded, the pages worn and creased, but her neat, looping handwriting leaped out at me like a warm embrace from another time. I settled onto the edge of the bed, the notebook trembling in my hands as I opened to a random page. My grandmother had always been a practical, resourceful woman, the kind who could coax tomatoes from the stingiest soil and mend a favorite blouse with a few expert stitches. She believed in the power of home remedies, those gentle secrets passed from mother to daughter, whispered over kitchen tables and shared during long afternoons of shelling peas or darning socks. There were recipes for sore throats and colds, instructions for treating bee stings and headaches, and on one page, marked with a little star and the careful note for joint pains, was a simple remedy: warm rosemary oil, rubbed gently into the knees each night for 3 nights, relieves pain, soothes, restores movement. I stared at those words, feeling both skeptical and oddly hopeful. Could something so simple help when nothing else had? Curiosity tugged at me. Later that day, I made my way to the health food store and asked for rosemary oil, explaining it was for an old family remedy. The clerk smiled knowingly, telling me that rosemary had long been valued for its healing properties. She suggested a pure, essential oil and reminded me to use it with care. Back home, I found myself searching the internet for any real science behind rosemary oil. I wanted proof, some modern validation of my grandmother's wisdom. To my surprise, I found study after study showing that rosemary contains powerful compounds like cineol and carnosic acid, both known for their anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects. One article from a reputable medical journal compared the effectiveness of rosemary oil to mild pharmaceutical pain relievers for joint pain, and the results were promising. In some trials, participants who used rosemary oil topically reported significantly less pain and better mobility than those who used a placebo. There were explanations for this, too. Rosemary's essential oils help increase blood circulation to the skin and underlying tissues. This enhanced flow helps reduce swelling, eases stiffness, and soothes the nerves. More than just a pleasant scent, rosemary was a centuries-old ally in the fight against pain, one I was now ready to embrace. That evening, I prepared to follow my grandmother's instructions to the letter. I poured a few drops of rosemary oil into the palm of my hand, warming it gently until it was just above body temperature. The aroma filled the room, fresh and comforting, a reminder of Sunday roasts and herb gardens, and I smiled despite myself. Following her careful directions, I massaged the oil slowly into my knees. First, the right, then the left, using slow, circular movements. The skin tingled pleasantly. I closed my eyes, focusing on the sensation, willing myself to believe in the possibility of relief. That night, I slept a little better than usual. I still woke once or twice, but the throbbing pain that normally haunted me seemed less insistent, less sharp. Encouraged, I repeated the routine the next night, and again on the third. Each time, I took my time, letting the ritual itself become a moment of gentle care and hope. By the third morning, something remarkable happened. I swung my legs out of bed, expecting the familiar jolt of pain, but instead I found only a faint stiffness. It wasn't gone, not entirely, but it had retreated as if my knees were finally willing to give me a chance. It felt like a small miracle, not just because the pain had faded, but because I felt empowered again. For so long, my days had been ruled by what hurt, what ached, what I could and could not do. Now, I discovered a tiny pocket of freedom. I wanted to hold on to that feeling, so I decided to expand the routine my grandmother had started. I began paying attention to the rest of my daily habits. I swapped out some processed foods for fresher choices. More leafy greens, salmon, blueberries, nuts, and plenty of water. I dusted off a set of gentle stretching exercises my physical therapist had shown me months before, moving through them at my own pace, celebrating every small improvement. On good days, I walked slowly around the block, savoring the breeze, and letting the sun warm my face. Sometimes, the walk was just to the mailbox and back, but it was something, and every step felt like a tiny victory. The truth is, when you live with chronic pain, it's easy to lose sight of the basics. You grow so focused on what hurts that you forget how powerfully food, movement, and even your breath can support healing. I started to see this routine as an act of self-respect, a promise not to give up on myself, even when progress felt slow. Along the way, I learned that even natural remedies like rosemary oil need to be used properly. There are common mistakes that can get in the way of success, lessons I had to learn, sometimes the hard way. For one, the oil needs to be warmed, not hot, and always massaged in with patience. Rushing the process or using too much oil at once left my skin feeling greasy without delivering the comfort I wanted. I also discovered that consistency mattered. Skipping a night, or using the oil only when the pain was at its worst, didn't work nearly as well as sticking to the routine, even when I felt a bit better. Another mistake? Mixing rosemary oil with synthetic creams or heavily scented lotions. I tried it once, thinking it might boost the effects, but instead, I ended up with a mild rash that took days to fade. Pure oil, on clean skin, with gentle hands and a calm mind, that was the recipe that worked. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. As the weeks passed, I became braver in sharing my discovery. I told my sister, who had struggled for years with pain in her hands from sewing. She called me 3 days later, her voice trembling with emotion. "I opened a jar of pickles this morning without any help," she said, laughing and crying at once. My neighbor Maggie, ever the skeptic, agreed to try rosemary oil on her aching hips. By the end of the week, she was back to walking her dog every afternoon, waving at me from across the street. The stories spread further. At Sunday church, I shyly shared my experience with the ladies' group. To my amazement, I wasn't the only one with a miracle to report. Edna had used rosemary oil on her swollen ankles and found herself dancing at her granddaughter's wedding just weeks later. Ruth rubbed the oil into her shoulders before bed and finally slept through the night for the first time in months. We all marveled at how such a simple remedy could make such a difference, and we encouraged each other to keep at it, to pass on our discoveries to daughters, friends, and anyone who might need a little hope. One afternoon, I invited my youngest granddaughter over and asked if she'd help me make a batch of rosemary oil for a friend. Together, we measured, mixed, and poured, the kitchen filled with laughter and the fragrant promise of healing. I told her stories of my grandmother, and she listened wide-eyed, her hands steady and capable. At that moment, I felt a sense of continuity, a thread of wisdom passing from one generation to the next. Of course, not every day is perfect. There are still mornings when my knees grumble and I have to remind myself to move slowly. But the difference now is that I have tools, gentle, natural tools, and a renewed sense of possibility. I no longer see myself as a victim of pain, but as someone who is actively engaged in my healing, drawing on both science and tradition. And I am not alone. My friends, my family, and countless women in our community are discovering that even when modern medicine doesn't have all the answers, the old ways can still offer comfort and relief. Sometimes, healing isn't about a cure or a quick fix, but about rediscovering faith in your ability to care for yourself. It's about small acts of kindness, toward yourself, toward your body, toward those you love. So, if you find yourself standing at the edge of hope and despair, wondering if there's anything left to try, let me offer you this: a story of an old notebook, a bottle of rosemary oil, and a circle of women who refuse to give up. You may be surprised by how much life is waiting for you, just beneath the surface, ready to bloom again with a little warmth, a little patience, and a willingness to believe that you deserve to feel better. The notebook, now resting on my nightstand, has become a symbol of resilience and grace. Whenever I feel discouraged, I read my grandmother's careful words, tracing each letter with my finger, reminded that I am part of a long line of women who have faced hardship with courage and creativity. We may not have had all the answers, but we shared what we knew, always hoping to make life a little brighter, a little easier, for those who came after us. The scent of rosemary still fills my home, subtle, grounding, and reassuring. And each time I reach for the bottle, I do so not just for myself, but for every woman who has ever felt limited by pain, every daughter and granddaughter who may one day need a little reminder that healing is possible, even when it arrives in the humblest of forms. After all, the greatest gifts are often those handed down quietly, tucked between the pages of a worn notebook, waiting patiently for us to find them just when we need them most. As I sit here reflecting on this journey, I want you to know something important. You are not alone. Pain may have slowed us down, or even reshaped our days, but it does not define who we are or what we are capable of. The relief road is often winding and slow, filled with trial and error, but every step forward is a victory worth celebrating. What began for me with a dusty old notebook and a simple bottle of rosemary oil has become so much more. A reminder that hope can be found in the most unexpected places and that healing is possible at any age. You deserve to wake up without that sharp ache, to move freely and comfortably, and to embrace the fullness of your life with joy and confidence. It's okay to be patient with yourself, to try gently, to listen to your body, and to cherish those moments when relief comes, even if it's just a little at a time. The small rituals we build, the choices we make, and the kindness we offer ourselves are the true acts of courage. If my story has touched you, if it has sparked a glimmer of hope, I invite you to share your own experiences below. Let's create a community where we lift each other, where stories of struggle become stories of strength. Remember, it's never too late to start caring for yourself in new ways. You are worthy of health, happiness, and peace. Thank you for listening and for being part of this journey. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.